Okay, good. So these are the questions which we ended with last time. We ended by looking at the nerve cells. For some of you have just joined us, we're looking at the nervous system, which nervous system consists of receptors, the central nervous system, the peripheral nervous system. Now, we are still discussing and trying to understand more of the peripheral nervous system, which includes the voluntary and the involuntary nerves. Voluntary means that those nerves that control the actions that you carry out when you want or when you decide. For example, you can decide to touch a hot object, you can decide to run, to walk, but there are some involuntary actions that you normally occur in your body. For example, you cannot decide that you digest food. Can you? For you, just your work is to eat food, and after eating, you don't decide how the intestines are going to digest the food. Or you cannot decide. Can you stop your heart from pumping? You don't decide it. Okay, those are controlled. Those are controlled by involuntary nerves. So we're still looking at the peripheral nervous system. But after the peripheral nervous system, we shall of course go on and study what we call the central nervous system, which includes the brain and the spinal cord. So we looked at all these and were able to understand these different nerve cells, 3 of them, the motor, the sensory, as well as the interneuron. Then we're able to see how they are shared. We did that exercise. And now, today we want to understand the different parts of the nerve cells and each one in detail and what does. Now, this is a typical nerve cell from what you're seeing on your screen. And this is a motor neuron. Why am I saying that it's a motor neuron? Because you can see that it has, its cell body is located at the extreme end. It is terminal. And it has a cell body. This cell body has a nucleus. If I can shade this part here is a nucleus. Okay. Now, what you are seeing as these kind of projections that arise from the cell body, these are called dendrites. These are dendrites, okay? And from the dendrites, what's the purpose of these dendrites? Is to receive information coming in from another cell, the impulses. So they receive impulses from another cell. And then those impulses are all summed up here, and then they travel along the axon. They travel along the axon, so the axon passes messages or transports impulses towards the effector organ. Philomena says, I can't see your screen. Philomena, if you can't see your screen, it means that maybe what you can do is you may first log out and rejoin again. You'll be able to see my screen. And I hope each one of you is able to see my screen very well. But in case you are not able, you first log out, then log back again. Then, yes, Alvin, you have a question. Yes, Alvin. When I click on you to unmute you, please unmute very fast so that we don't waste time. When I ask you to unmute very fast, and then you ask your question. Yes, Alvin, what's your question? Alvin, your network is poor up. Please try to be stable. Please.
As in the diagram that you have just drawn.
Mm-hmm.
I have not seen the name of the part that you display.
You have not seen the name of the what?
Part that you have displayed.
The name of the what?
Of the displayed part that you have displayed on screen.
Maybe I'm not the one. I'm not getting your question, but what you are seeing here, this is a structure of the motor neuron or the motor nerve cell. There are three types of motor nerves. I don't know whether you were here last time when we were having our last time's lesson. We studied about three types, and I'm showing you this one type, and I'm using it to study the different parts, the general parts of what a nerve cell should have. And I'm saying that a nerve cell should have a cell body. This is the swollen thing here, here. And the cell body has a nucleus inside here. This is what I shaded. The nucleus controls all the activities of the nerve cell. Now, it has also projections which receive impulses from another cell, but the cell in this case is not here. So because remember the motor neuron receives impulses from the interneuron and then it conducts them to the effector organs. Okay. And then Benjamin says we don't have notes. These notes I had sent them in Google Classroom, but maybe there are some of you who are not here in the previous thing. I'm going to reload them again, put the whole notes there. So I'll share them again, don't worry. And then from there, the axon, the axon transports impulses towards the effector organ. And it ends in what we call terminal axons or terminal branches of the axon. Okay. And then along the nerve cell, along the axon, there is a fatty layer of fatty tissue, which we call the myelin sheath. Now, this is what we call the myelin sheath, and it is being labeled there. This one covers the axon of some neurons and enables speeding up of transmission of the impulses. Then, in between there, those myelin sheath, we call them Benjamin is saying, is it about coordination in plants? We are actually looking at coordination in animals. Plants don't have nerve cells, please. Coordination in plants don't use nerves. They use hormones. So when you see we are looking at nerves, these nerves are in animals. You have these nerves because you are also an animal. So we call it the node of Ranvier here, also enabling in speeding up the rate of transmission of the impulses. From there, these are the general. So the cell body, this is another picture of the motor neuron, that it has cell body, this blue part here that you are seeing, which has a nucleus surrounded by cytoplasm. It controls all the activities of the cell. Then the axon is the one, this kind of wire-like structure. For some of you who were here when we were starting this lesson, I compared everything in detail, and I wouldn't want to reteach what I did last time. And then the myelin sheath, which is a fatty material that covers the axon, enabling in speeding up the rate of transmission of impulses. And the cells that secrete this myelin sheath, this swelling here, that is what we call a cell. It is called a Schwann. The spelling is here, obviously. The sheath here, this fatty layer. I think you're able to see that fatty layer, and then it ends in the axon terminals. Okay. So then the dendrites, I've already talked about them. These ones receive impulses from other cells towards, actually they are going to be conducting impulses towards the cell body. That's their main. Then the Schwann cell secreting myelin sheath, node of Ranvier, speeding up the rate of transmission of the impulse. Cytoplasm, site of chemical reaction. Dendron is the one that transmits impulses towards the cell body. Of course, when they are broken down into many, they're dendrites. And then this is another picture. So again, it is a picture of a motor neuron. And I'm showing it to you so that you can get used to it. Whenever you look at it, you must be able to label it. And by the way, you guys were able to label this motor neuron last time without anything, because it is the last exercise which we did. Now, how can we compare them? Of course, both transmit impulses. That's a similarity. Whenever you are asked to compare anything in biology, just know that you must give similarities as well as differences. Now, last time, I was able to describe both of them very well. And it is at this moment that I would even ask you to even give me these. But of course, I know some of you have already forgotten. Okay. So they both have a nucleus. They're here. If you can try to look at them, they look at this motor neuron. Okay. And then look at this sensory neuron. Similarities. I think you're going to give me the differences. Yeah. So we are having similarities. They both contain a nucleus. So you can say nucleus here and a nucleus here. They both impulses move in one direction. Now, this motor transmits impulses towards the effector organs, but the sensory transports impulses to the central nervous system, that is the brain and spinal cord. Now, having looked at that, can you give me differences? I will ask you people to raise your hands and I choose you. Look at these two pictures and you try to tell me differences that you are able to see. Sensory neuron. Okay. I'm seeing Annette Leah. Yes, Annette.
Yes, master. The sensory neuron has a short axon, whereas the motor neuron has a long axon.
Thank you very much. That's a very perfect answer. Yes. For some of you who have just joined us and you don't know what axon is, the axon for the motor neuron is this one here. Okay, circle it. Is this one here. Okay. And then the axon for the sensory neuron is this one here. But of course, this picture may not be a little bit realistic. If I can go back to this picture a little bit, just in a moment here. You can see this is the axon of the sensor, which is short, and the axon of the motor, you can see that it is long. Okay, let me pick some up. Moronji Davis. Yes, Moronji. When I ask you to unmute, you please unmute very fast, not to waste time. Yes, Davis.
In sensory neurons, impulses are conducted towards the cell body, whereas in motor neurons, impulses are transmitted away from the cell body.
Okay. That is also an observation. Okay. And then that is when you're looking at it in terms of the axon. There you can actually be specific that the axon in this transmits impulses away from the cell body. The axon of this transmits impulses towards the cell body. There you are very specific and you get a perfect mark. And then I'm saying Juma Felix. Yes, Juma. Juma.
The motor neuron
Yes,
consists of dendrites, unlike the sensory neuron.
Come again.
The motor neuron consists of dendrites, unlike the sensory neuron.
Okay, thank you for that, Juma. But Juma, this is not called a neutron. A neutron is a particle which you study in chemistry, which is found in a nucleus of an atom. But in these cells, we don't have a neutron. A neutron, this one is called a neuron. A neuron, not a neutron. And a neuron, if you don't want to call it neuron and this word disturbs you, you just call it nerve cell. Nerve cell. They are the same. So you can actually call it motor nerve cell and the sensory nerve cell if the word neuron kind of disturbs. But both of them have the dendrites, as you might have said that unlike. And in most cases in biology, when we are giving differences, don't use that like if something doesn't have it, tell us what it does. It have it or it doesn't have it? Okay. But even this motor neuron has the dendrites. It is this one. It's dendron here. This is one, but it has many dendrons. But this one has one dendron. So you can't say that it doesn't have them. Then we can go to Philomena Bakita. Yes, Philomena.
In motor neuron, terminal dendrites connect with muscles and effectors, while in sensory neuron, terminal dendrites connect with the intermediate neuron.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. That is actually correct. A terminal meaning something which is at the extreme end. Thank you, Philomena. Then I'm seeing Mwevesa Derek. Yes, Derek.
In motor neuron, the motor neuron has a bigger nucleus than a sensory neuron.
Okay. You see, for the case of size, Derek, please let us not use size, big or smaller, because it depends. It depends. Maybe now, if you look at this one here, and this one, which one do you think is bigger or smaller? They're almost the same. Look at this nucleus and this nucleus. Okay, they're almost the same. Let me read some chats here. Judith says that the sensory neuron transmits impulses to the central nervous system, while motor neuron transmits impulses to the effector. That's very correct. Ernest says sensory neurons have one long dendron, while motor neurons have many dendrons. Thank you very much, Ernest. That's correct. And then let me choose here Daphne. Yes, Daphne.
Yeah, sir. In the motor neurons, dendrites connect with effectors, while in sensory neuron, terminal dendrites connect to the interneurons.
Yeah, thank you, Daphne. But of course, someone had already said that. But thank you very much for that. Let me end with Alvin. No, Mojuni Timothy. Yes, Mojuni.
A motor neuron transmits impulse from the central nervous system, while a sensory neuron transmits impulse to the central nervous system.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, you guys for all your contributions. Actually, what you have given us is actually correct. Those are the differences in summary. Those are the differences between motor neuron as well as sensory neuron. And then Brenner says the motor neuron has the cell body at the top of the body, while the sensory has the cell body at the center. So Brenner, you can, instead of saying at the top, it is terminal. That is, it is at one end of the nerve. And the other one is like an axon branch, or it is in the middle. Thank you for that. Now, let us go to, now, you see, with these things of transmission of impulses, for example, when you step on a nail or someone pricks you using a pin, okay? Ariho, you have a question? Yes, Ariho, let me unmute you. Okay, you have just raised your hand. So when you step on a pin or something pierces your skin, check what is happening. Now, in your skin, you have what we call pain receptors. Now, those receptors in your skin receive the pain, they are stimulated, and check what is happening. The impulses are going to travel along the sensory neuron and then to your side of the backbone. Now, each one of you, I'm assuming this is your head. with your eyes. Of course, you are smiling. Okay, you may be crying. Okay, you may be crying because you have stepped on a nail, and then this is a finger. Let me use a finger. Yes, I'm assuming those are your fingers. Those are your fingers, and then that's your back. Okay. Okay, those are your legs. Those are your legs. So I'm just assuming. So when a nail pierces your finger or a pin, this sensory neuron is going to transmit impulses along within your arm. Okay, and then it will go. Now you guys have what we call a backbone. I'm assuming this is your backbone. This is your backbone. This is your backbone. This is your backbone. Now, inside your backbone, you have what we call a spinal cord in your backbone. Now, you have what we call a spinal cord. Which spinal cord? This is how it looks like when they cut you from. I'm assuming someone gets a knife and they dissect you like this, across, they cut you from left going to right, and then they zoom into the spinal cord. The spinal cord is found in between the vertebral bones. Okay, and some people, when they get accidents and their vertebral bones press against the spinal cord in there, that is trouble. That's why some people paralyze and they can no longer walk again. You find someone that he can no longer feel again. Okay, so so the impulse travel along the central nerve to that spinal cord in between. It is the one which is going to interpret. Okay, now this information has been processed, so it will send back information again via in what we call a ventral route, because it has a once information reaches, it can send back information via the motor neuron. So this is what it is showing. So information goes back and it tells your muscles to contract so that you can withdraw your arm. That is actually what happens. So for us, we have been at these nerves and how they transport, but generally, this is what happens inside you. Like the information does not first, of course, the brain is made up of the central nervous system is made up of the brain and spinal cord. For some of these reflexes, like you don't first think. Information, for you to withdraw the hand from a hot object or a pin, you don't first think about it. So that information doesn't need to first go to the brain here, but rather the spinal cord knows what to do already. That something is burning me, something has pricked me, tell it to remove the hand. So it does it automatically. You don't first think about it. And those are some of the reflexes which we are going to study. Okay, and you should be able to label the structure of the transverse section through the spinal cord, as we shall see slowly as time goes by. Now, we are going to look at how the nerve impulse is traveling, because check, you cannot tell me, or I cannot tell you that some of you even are very tall. You find someone, I'm assuming this is the boy, they are very tall. Okay, I'm assuming that is your trouser. So you find someone that they are very tall. So I'm assuming your hand stops here. Now, imagine this is you. Do you think you have one nerve cell or one sensory neuron or motor neuron? Because the information travel from your fingers to your backbone and back. Look at each one of you. Look at your hands. Look at the size or the length of your hands. Your hands are extremely long. You get it? So you don't, no one should tell you that actually you only have one nerve cell or one sensory cell. You have many which are interconnecting. And I can show you here, this is one way. This is a picture showing how these cells are interconnecting. So a cell connecting to another, This is how they are actually. But normally this interneuron is in the you're going to find it here within the spinal cord. This is where you find it. And you can even find many. So how does the impulse travel from one, let's say, nerve cell, then to reach another cell, that is the interneuron? Now, in between there is a space. You can see that there is some space. That space is called the synapse. Okay, so a neuron or a nerve cell does not actually cross direct, but rather when it reaches at the terminal ends, there's a chemical which is secreted in that space, and that chemical makes this other cell to generate its own impulse, and then it passes on and on and on. So this is what we are going to look at. So the nerve impulse is an electrical message transmitted along the nerve fiber. As you can see here, these are electrical kind of signals being transmitted. And how they move, and that's where this picture comes in. Transmission of an impulse along the axon terminal. Okay, now imagine, look at this picture. You can see this here, this nerve is kind of shining, meaning that the impulse is traveling along. And you can see that it comes, and then it comes up to these axon terminals. Now, this electric signal does not just go and continue along in this nerve cell, no, but when it reaches here, there's a chemical which is produced. Now, that chemical stimulates this other membrane to generate its own impulse, and the impulse continues. Okay, and again, you can see here, I'm still giving you a background because very many students fail to understand how this comes about. And there is no way this thing is examinable, and it is part of the syllabus. So I can't skip it. You just have to understand how it actually happens. Now, if you want to understand this process of how an impulse travels from one nerve cell to another, and by the way, maybe you may ask me, why is it that there is even space? Why is it that it doesn't just continue? That space has a lot of functions, of course, also. It also has different importances. One of them is that it ensures that the nerve cells are not continuously stimulated, because just imagine if they were directly connected, sometimes even less important stimulus may scare you. But when you are seated and an insect is working on you, you like the impulse will not be so strong, so you will not even waste your energy that you are scared. Hey, an insect is traveling on me. No, because of that space. Because if it was directly connected, the impulse would be so strong, like whichever thing touches you, you just get scared. Every time you would be on wunkenke, you will be scared all the time. But because the impulse, when it travels along this nerve cell, there is a chemical which is called neurotransmitter that is secreted in that space. Now, that chemical is the one that makes this other cell to generate its own impulse. And in case the impulse was strong, a lot of chemical would be poured here, so this cell would quickly generate an impulse, and then it would be strong. But if the impulse was weak, like an insect walking on you, okay, so a little of this neurotransmitter is produced in the space, so it may not even cause any alarm in this adjacent cell. So the impulse reaches slowly, and then you don't feel like it's just like a small insect, and you don't waste your energy. That's how important. And actually, this space has very many importances, but of course, that is one that I can simplify for you, but there are many. But for most of the information, probably you will learn more about it in case you continue with biology at A level. So how does this space occur, or how does the impulse travel from one nerve cell at the axon terminal to another nerve cell? You see, you can see one nerve cell. This is the motor neuron to this interneuron. How does it travel? That is what we are going to understand. And I want to use, let me use this picture, I think. when an impulse arrives at the axon terminal, okay, first of all, there are channels here. And okay, let's first understand using this picture. These axons can be many, like here in this 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But you can see this picture is only zooming into only one. You see, we are zooming in into only one, but there are many, and they are all happening at the same time. Now, when an impulse arrives at this axon terminal here, you have calcium ions here, calcium ions here. So calcium ions enter into this axon terminal. Now, this space is called a synaptic cleft. Okay, let me use a red pen here. The space is called synaptic cleft. A cleft is like a small space, or you can call it a synapse. Now, this membrane of the axon terminal before this space is called the presynaptic membrane, because the pre means before. Synaptic membrane, and the space after this space cleft or the synapse is called post. Sorry, not the space, the membrane, post synaptic membrane. Synaptic membrane. So you must know this technology here. The space, this membrane here, that which is involving the axon terminal, is pre. The space is called the synapse, and then this membrane is called the postsynaptic membrane. Now, I'm going to summarize it very fast so that you can understand. When an impulse arrives at the axon terminal, this swelling here, calcium ions enter here in the axon terminal. When the calcium ions enter, they make vesicles. These are now this neurotransmitter sorry for that. Now the neurotransmitter, we ain't getting the teacher. Oh, okay, I'm now back. It was just a glimpse of the what? Of the network. I hope you can now hear me well. So let me repeat very fast. An impulse comes, calcium enters the synaptic knob. The vis makes the vesicle to fuse with the presynaptic membrane, powers the neurotransmitter into the space which is called synapse. Now that neurotransmitter attaches on the postsynaptic membrane and generates an impulse on the postsynaptic membrane. And so, okay, my network wants to misbehave. Sorry for that. Okay, so and it makes this postsynaptic membrane to generate its own impulse, and the impulse continues. That hard, guys. Can I repeat once more? Let me repeat. Step 1, impulse arrives. Step 2, calcium enters the synaptic knob. Step 3, synaptic vesicle fuses with the presynaptic membrane. Step 4, neurotransmitter powered into the synapse. Step 5, neurotransmitter attaches on the postsynaptic membrane. Step 6, the postsynaptic membrane generates an impulse. I hope that is very clear. Alvin is saying, where does the calcium come from? The calcium is always there in the spaces within the tissues, and that's why the doctors always encourage you to eat foods containing calcium. You see, when they tell you to eat foods containing those nutrients, that this one contains the zinc, this one contains calcium, this one contains that. That's why you need these nutrients, and that's why doctors encourage you to eat foods rich in those nutrients. When you eat them, they go and linger around there because they know that they have a purpose to do in some of these body processes. Have you guys understood? Because this concept disturbs very many people. And I hope you guys have gotten it. These are the words which I've just summarized for you. The most common neurotransmitter is called acetylcholine. Okay, it is the one which excites the neuron. When a nerve impulse reaches the axon terminal, vesicle containing neurotransmitter moves towards presynaptic membrane. Vesicle fuses with the membrane. You see, these are the words which I've just summarized. Maybe to summarize it once more as a last thing for one of you who was not paying attention. Okay, I said there is a gap between one nerve cell and another. Okay, now that gap is called a synapse, aka synaptic cleft. Synapse, you can either call it a synapse or synaptic cleft. Now, this nerve cell which is bringing the impulse, its membrane of the axon terminal, you can call it the presynaptic membrane, and you can also call it the presynaptic neuron or nerve cell. That is the nerve cell before this gap. And then this one after, the next nerve cell, you call it the postsynaptic nerve cell, and its membrane is going to be called the postsynaptic membrane. Now, if we have understood that, we start the process. So, first of all, impulse arrives, calcium enters the knob. It makes these synaptic vesicles to come and fuse with the presynaptic membrane, powering the neurotransmitter in the gap. Now, the neurotransmitter attaches on the postsynaptic membrane and activates it, generating an impulse. And then it continues flowing. Simple as that. Is that hard? So I hope you guys have been able to understand that very simple, complex process, which normally disturbs very many people. So what is the purpose of that gap? That a nerve cell, in order to transmit an impulse to another nerve cell, there is always a gap, which is microscopic, which we are calling a synapse. What is the purpose of that gap? The Danvers Brenda says, what is the use of the synaptic cleft? That is where I'm going. What is the use of the synaptic cleft? So this is it. That gap, you can also call it synaptic cleft. One is it enables the propagation of an impulse from one neuron to another. That is, of course, that one looks like as if it is obvious, but look at this second one. It ensures that the impulse moves in one direction. Okay. Why does the impulse move in one direction? See, these synaptic vesicles which have the neurotransmitter, they are only found in this presynaptic neuron. They are not found on this post. So, and these neurotransmitters, they are the ones that activate. So because they're only found here, so it is the presynaptic neuron which can produce the neurotransmitter. So this ensures that the impulse travels in one direction. And it is very much important because you don't need confusion. You can imagine you have touched something hot, and that means the impulse is coming from there, that hand that has touched the hot thing, going to maybe the brain or to the spinal cord for interpretation. And as it is moving, probably this one is also firing backward. You see, So they're going to find here and they clash. So you're not going to have a coordinated kind of movement. And because of that, this gap is very much important in ensuring that the impulse travels in only one direction for efficiency. Okay, yeah, I think God was very, very bright, okay, when he was creating some of these things. And then another person is saying that this person is called Mark. Mark says that, sir, when the neurons reach the synaptic cleft, can't some go off track because of the space? Mark, it's not called neurons. It is called neurotransmitter. Okay, so maybe the question would be, when the neurotransmitter reaches the synapse, can some go off? Now, let me use this picture to answer your question, Mark. You can see here. Whether it diffuses there along, I think, Mark, you wanted to mean like Oksamuka, this pass off. Okay, it has no problem as long as it is powered on the same membrane, because it is all about moving and stimulating the whole membrane around it. So it has no problem whether it goes on the side. No, there's no problem at all. The main goal is to activate this membrane into generating its own impulse. Okay, not this impulse to continue as it has been. And then Alvin says, is then the calcium aided with the transport system to move? Yes, it is by active transport. There is, of course, some of those details they are not required for this level. Alvin, if you can look at this picture here, which is currently being displayed, have you ever seen this thing called mitochondria? Now, mitochondria in all cells, they are there. They're called the powerhouse. Powerhouse, why? Because they generate energy, which the cells use to carry out different functions. Yes, these channels, they have some transport system which use to transport calcium from this side out of the membrane to inside. You get it? Which uses energy provided for by the mitochondria. Okay, so thank you for that question, Calvin. Alvin. Then let me look at another question. Annette Leah, which chemical is secreted in the synaptic cleft? Now, Annette, there are so many, up to about 40 different neurotransmitter chemicals, but the most common one is called acetylcholine, but there is also another one called GABA, there's another one called noradrenaline, there's another one, there are many, aspartate, there are many, but each one has what it does, depending on what you're going to do. I can give you an example. There's a neurotransmitter called dopamine. Do you know that they can inject you with a chemical which goes into the neurotransmitter that makes you to laugh? And your body normally produces it if you are stimulated to see something funny. That chemical is produced in this cleft and you laugh. But after making you laugh, that chemical is destroyed. And once it is destroyed by enzymes there, you stop laughing. Unless someone makes you happy again, then it can be secreted again, you see? Now, there are some others which are going to improve your mood. You become happy. There are some others that are going to make you depressed. You feel sad. Most of these are chemical neurotransmitters. And then it says that which transport system aids the calcium to move to the synaptic nerve? Now, Alvin, that is way beyond our scope. It is just transported by active transport. Okay, but the transport system, no, that is way beyond. It will just confuse our fellow learners. Then Peter says, teacher, can't the impulse generated be different from that which was being transferred? Yes, it can somehow change depending, but normally it doesn't change. So depending on how intense it was, that's why for some, they may generate here and they dissipate somewhere, they don't continue. so that your motor neuron is not even stimulated to fire back so that you can act. And it says is the energy secreted by the mitochondria in form of ATL. ATP. Yes, energy is in form of ATP. For some of you who do not know ATP, ATP in full stands for adenosine triphosphate. Now, adenosine triphosphate, that is the energy currency. Currency means like money. Like in our world now, to do anything, you need money, sente. Money is sente. Someone was calling it sente or kasente or whatever. Sente, well, whichever thing that you're going to do, money is involved. Now, that is ATP in our body. Whether you want to talk, whether you want to laugh, whether you want to think, whether you want to sleep or do everything, you need energy in form of ATP. Yes, Annette, that is true. Then, teacher, I saw sodium somewhere. What is its use? That is Trevasoft. Now, Trevasoft, I didn't want to go into those details of how the membrane is stimulated. Okay, here, the sodium voltage gated channel, which is here. That information is way beyond, it is for A level. But let me give you a small glimpse, Trevor. But for some of you, in case you've not understood, please don't over ask about it. Now, when the membrane comes, when the neurotransmitter is secreted in this gap, it attaches on these protein receptors. Okay. Now, those protein receptors, these are the gates. They make these gates to open. When the gates open, they let in sodium ions into this postsynaptic membrane, making the inside to be more positive because the membrane is supposed to be negatively charged inside. So it makes, when the sodium enter here, they make it to become positive. And that is what we call depolarization. Now, once depolarization occurs, it leads into firing of what we call an action potential. And then a stimulus is generated and it continues. Please, if you have not understood that statement, don't over ask again. For our level, we only need to know that the neurotransmitter arrives in the space and then it attaches on the presynaptic membrane, generation of an impulse, which continues in the neuron. Okay, and then Peter says, what is the use of calcium? I said that calcium enters this presynaptic neuron knob and it makes these synaptic vesicles to begin traveling, and then they come fuse with the presynaptic membrane so that the neurotransmitter is powered into the cleft. That is the purpose of the calcium ions. Is there any other question concerning this thing here? Okay, I think I've answered most of your questions about transmission of an impulse. Of course, this thing, many people, and they fail to understand it. Also, the synapse acts as a junction in the nervous system that can diverge or converge information. Also prevents continuous stimulation of the body organs. Yes, because the moment that let me go back. The moment the neurotransmitter is still here, the body is stimulated, or a given part of the organ is stimulated. Let me give you an example. But of course, this example, I didn't want to use it. There are some drugs which people swallow, depending on what they want. There's a drug called Valine. There's a drug called, we have heard of, there's a drug, like there are many drugs. Now, some of those drugs, they imitate these neurotransmitters, or even heroin, Njaga, let me call it Njaga. Some of you have heard of something called Njaga. Now, when you swallow Njaga, or because there's some even who inject Njaga in their blood vessels, direct into blood. So when you take Njaga, or when you inject yourself, sorry for that network glitch, inject yourself with Njaga, this is what happens. The Njaga is going to come into this cleft here. It will diffuse through your tissues up to this cleft here. Now it will, depending on the type of unjaga that you have taken, for some people they may take it and it excites them. For some people it may just make them like kind of be in some mood which is they don't want anything to disturb them. So it depends on the type which you've taken. So it will come here and then it will be making this membrane to get excited. So someone is going to get excited for some good time, okay? But you know, but by default, our bodies want to be in some good mode of excitement. So the moment it is broken down and then it gets finished, okay, you are going to get an addiction. You will want more of it here in this space. That is what will put you the urge, to make you have the urge to go and buy more njaga like that. Like you always want to take it on. And of course, it's going to make you not to work, not to have weird thoughts. There are many things that it can make you do. And this is also talking about cocaine. Yes. Someone is saying, at what speed do neurotransmitter travel? It depends. It depends on the intensity of the stimulus, but almost it acts immediately. They are measured in microseconds. They are measured in microseconds. Like just like you can now, if I can ask you, when you switch on the light, what speed does the electron take to reach the bulb it can light? Can you tell me the speed? It's like as if the moment you switch it on, it lights immediately. So they are measured in microseconds. Okay. Is there any other question? Because I'm seeing we are left with about, I wouldn't want to leave this part in case you've not understood. If there's any question concerning this part, because it is very much important and many people do not understand it. Okay, because in summary, impulse arrives. Okay, Noreen, you have a question. Let me unmute you. Yes, Noreen.
Sir, I wanted you to explain to me again how the calcium voltageated channel, what it does.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Noreen. Yeah, I've been trying to be brief and summarize as much as possible, because some of these people, what people call complex processes, for me, I don't want to use a lot of words. And Mulunji is also asking, what is the use of the vesicle? Vesicle, if you understand Luganda, it's like a chisawo, it's like a neurotransmitter. It's like a bag that holds the neurotransmitter. And I've told you the purpose of the neurotransmitter. Now, let me answer Noreen's question very fast. Now, the moment an impulse arrives, okay, it makes this membrane so much permeable to calcium ions. Now, calcium enter. Now, it is these calcium ions that come and activate this vesicle to begin moving towards the presynaptic membrane. I think I've just answered what the calciums do. And then Chisache has a question. Yes, Chisache.
Thank you, sir.
Chisache, your volume is extremely low.
So I was asking what may cause one to be sterilized and is feeling pain.
What may cause someone to be
sterilized?
Okay. Okay. Yeah, thank you for that question, Chisache. What may cause someone to be sterilized? You see, when you are going for an operation, for some of you have undergone operations, for example, operation on the leg or the hand, the doctor may ask you, normally, it's actually not a doctor who does it. It's not a doctor. There are people who study anesthetics, anesthesia. Those are people who actually, you can even do that course at university. And that is because a doctor who is going to operate on you is not the one who sterilizes you in case you're going to undergo an operation. And those people mix certain chemicals in certain proportions, which can sterilize you for some hours, depending on the hours that they want you to sleep. Or so when they are going to operate on you, they can actually sterilize only one part of the body, like let's say the hand, or they can, or the legs, or the whole body. They make you sleep when they are going to carry out an operation. Okay, so there are chemicals which can come, which they can inject you with in certain proportions, and they come in this cleft. When they come in this cleft, in this synapse, they make this membrane not to accept to generate any more impulse. When they make it not to generate any impulse, it means you are not going to feel anything in that, in the part before it. You get it? They are going to inject you with a chemical. It will come and hold be in this space, and it will make this membrane not to respond, this membrane not to generate any more impulses. And if it doesn't generate any more impulses, it means impulses cannot travel to the brain and you can't feel. That's why they can sterilize you, and there's a part whereby you can't feel anything, even if they inject you, even if they cut there, because impulses have been cut off, just pouring that chemical in this gap. Yeah, I think I've liked your question because it has made me answer some people. What's the function of the synaptic knob? And unit Timothy. Chloroform. Chloroform is not the only one. Actually, they don't use chloroform. Chloroform is even toxic. When you consume a lot of it, it is carcinogenic. And the carcinogenic substance is one which can induce cancer in someone's body. Then Maroon says, at what speed do nerves move? I already talked about it. Depends. Teacher Mosh says, teacher, I want you to differentiate for me the synaptic knob and the synaptic cleft. Synaptic knob, I don't know whether Mosh you understand Luganda. Okay, let me use this picture here. Synaptic knob are these swellings like that. That is like a knob. A knob, I think you've heard of some, was it Ragadi's song when he said that Tokwatako knob, meaning like if you guys have a remote at home, and that remote which you use has those buttons. Those buttons, you can call them knobs. Those swellings on the remote control, they're knobs. So at the end of this synapse, it has those swellings which are called the knob. Now, from the knob, there's a space before you reach the membrane of the adjacent neuron. That is what they call the synaptic cleft, or the space. I hope you guys you've got the difference now. It is even already almost time. When I faint, why is it I don't feel anything? Kasijo, I think it's you can see it's now 1 minute past 3, and the lesson is normally just 1 hour. So please, for some of these questions, for example, this one, why is that when someone faints, they're not feeling anything? And then, master, what is animal hormone? So please, you can hold those questions. We shall begin with those next time. Goodbye and enjoy yourselves. Bye-bye.